Okay. Omagyanatmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitanjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So we are continuing with our new journey, the Bhagavad-Gītā. And last week we went through the introduction and Mangala Charanam. And so we're beginning with chapter 1. And I do have set up here the audio of Srila Gurudev chanting the verses, the Bhagavad-Gītā, which is such a wonderful wealth that we have. So I'll be playing that as we go. So I think we can just dive right in.
श्री गुरु गौरांग जयता श्रीमद् भगवद-गीता प्रथमोत्थाय सौन्य दर्शन धृतराष्ट्र उवाच धर्मक्षेत्रे कुरुक्षेत्रे समवेता जुजुत्सव मामकाः पाण्डवाश्चैव किमकुर्वत संजय संजय उवाच दृष्टा तु पाण्डवानीकं मूढं दुर्योधनस्तदा आचार्यमुपसंगम्य राजा वचनमब्रवीत् पश्यैतां पाण्डुपुत्राणाम् आचार्यमहतीं च मुं मूढां द्रुपदपुत्रेण तव शिष्येन धीमता अत्र शूरा महेश्वासा भीमार्जुनसमायुधि युयुधान विराटश्च द्रुपदश्च महारथ धृष्टकेतुश्च कीतान् काशीराजश्च वीर्यवान् पुरुजित् कुन्तिभोजश्च शैब्यश्च नरपुङ्गवः युधामन्युश्च विक्रान्त उत्तमौजाश्च वीर्यवान् सौभद्रो द्रौपदेयाश्च सर्व एव महारथा.
Okay, so we went through the first 6 verses, so we'll read the translation. And welcome Krishna Lalana, who's just joined us from Australia. Dandavat. So here we are, a very dramatic opening, right, to Bhagavad-Gītā. And we are actually in the middle of Mahabharata. That is the context. And so there's this feud going on between these two groups of warring cousins. But it is, actually a battle of righteousness, right? Arjuna, his brothers, and their supporters are representing Dharma, and his cousins, the Kauravas, are representing Adharma. And so this is the background. And of course, it's really ultimately an excuse for the message of Bhagavad-Gītā, because ultimately Bhagavad-Gītā is completely universal in its message. It doesn't have anything to do with the battle from the highest angle of vision, but it is an excuse for this wonderful discussion to take place. It's a catalyst, right, for this discussion to take place. And which is in itself quite interesting, right? And it's something that we see repeatedly in the pastimes of the Lord, right? That real reality is within, right? Real reality is subjective, to use Srila Sridhar Maharaj's language. We should not be so caught up with the external circumstances. And so we see at times that the highest type of revelation comes in the most troubling circumstances. One of the most dramatic is the fact that Krishna is born in prison, right? The supreme, it's something that just hit me a few years ago, right? The supreme personality of Godhead, the absolute supreme being, he chooses to appear in this world in a prison cell, right? I mean, how incongruous we would think that is, right? And here, similarly, Bhagavad-Gītā, it's one of the most famous and influential scriptures that's come out of India. It's it's giving such profound spiritual wisdom, and it comes out on a battlefield in the midst of a conflict, right? Again, it wouldn't, at first thought, it seems quite incongruous. So we can take something from that, right? That we should try to always maintain our connection with the inner world, with our inner connection. That's really where reality lies. We should not waste so much of our energy, right? Getting caught up with the sensory plane and what's happening on the surface. And that's one of the early teachings of Bhagavad-Gītā, right? Macha sparshastu kunteya sitoshna sukha dukkada agama payino nityas tam titiksha bharata, right? Chapter 2, I believe, where Krishna is telling Arjuna, heat, cold, happiness, sadness, all these things are coming and going in this world of duality. But we should just tolerate those things, right? Do not allow ourselves to become entangled with like and dislike, that whole world of the mind and the senses. So here we are on the battlefield, and there is this curious backstory, right? That Dhritarashtra's chariot driver, right, Sanjaya, he had this special blessing. I don't remember who it came from. Was it Vyasadeva, perhaps? And he was able to see what was happening on the battlefield. So Dhritarashtra, he is the uncle of the Pandavas, and he's the ruling king at the time. He's in his palace, right? And he, of course, wants his sons to win. There's this very interesting article of Srila Śrīmad. I have it right here, actually. And Srila Śrīmad is speaking about Draupadi's moment of surrender, right? When the Kauravas tried to disrobe her in such a horrific way. And Srila Śrīmad, she gives this very nice, I mean, the article is amazing in many ways, many really interesting points. But one of the things, and I've read it several times, but this last time I read it, it just struck me in a new way. And Srila Śrīmad made this interesting comment here, saying that we can understand Dhritarashtra to be a representation of the mind, right? I thought that was wonderful because Dhritarashtra, for those, I think everyone here is fairly familiar with Mahabharata. Dhritarashtra, he's like this little bit of a mixed up character, right? That he's not exactly evil, he's not wicked, he's not as bad as some of his sons are, right? He doesn't go quite as far as they do. And he does have some feeling of compassion and affection for his nephews, the Pandavas. But, so but then he's also very attached to his sons, and for the most part, he wants his sons to be, successful and have a superior position to the Pandavas. So he's a bit kind of like, he's on the mental plane. That's what Srila Sridhar mentions here, which I thought really just explains it very well. Because the mind can be like that, right? The mind can go this way or that way. It's flickering. It's not a stable plane. So here Srila Sridhar explains that so nicely. Dhritarashtra is the representation of mind. And Vidura, right? Vidura is the other brother. He's another uncle to the Pandavas. So Vidura represents conscience. And then he says Bhishma represents the sense of duty, which may be vitiated. So that's another really interesting point, because if it's easy for the sense of duty to be misdirected, right? And that's what happens in this whole saga going on between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, because, like especially in this moment when Draupadi is dishonored, there are so many seniors there who are just silent, right? Which is very disappointing and strange. But Srila Sridhar explains it very well here. It's because they have this misdirected sense of duty, right? They feel that they can't overstep the Kauravas, and they feel that they should have loyalty to the Kauravas. And so they're kind of like, they just feel like stuck. They don't know how to deal with the situation. So I thought that was a really interesting point too, how our sense of duty can sometimes get us into bad places, right? For example, if we have, well, like as we see here in Mahabharata, we could have a family member who is, engaged in bad activity, but we may still support them because we feel this obligation, oh, the family connection. We may not correct them as we should, right? Or report them as we should because we feel, oh, they're my, mother, father, child, sister, brother, whatever it is, right? So I thought that was a really interesting point, how our sense of duty we may have a sense of duty, but it's just misdirected. But then conscience, right? Then Vidura, he's representing the conscience. That's more broad in its scope, right? That's appreciating things in a broader way. What is actually right? What is actually good, right? And that is something someone must have a higher consciousness, right? As we see in society at large, it's easy for persons to be misdirected, right? And and it is more rare to find someone who can really ask questions, right, about what's actually the right thing, not just, follow the masses. So anyway, that's a bit of a side note, but I thought that was really interesting. Um, so right, so here we are, and Dhritarashtra, so as I said, right, as we said, he's kind of like in this funny position where he's not quite here or there. He's not exactly good, he's not exactly bad. Um, and I remember there's a commentary that I read by, I think it was Vishwanath Chakravarti, one of our Vaishnava scholars. He's saying that Dhritarashtra, he's the father of the Kauravas, right? He's like he's asking in this apparently innocent way, like what's happening on the battlefield. Sanjaya has this blessing, right, to be able to see what's going on far, far away on the battlefield. So Dhritarashtra's asking apparently innocently, "Oh, what's happened on the battlefield?" But he's like secretly hoping, that his sons will will be, winning the battle. And there was this one comment. I think I have a note here in my book as well, because Kurukshetra is also a holy place, and you may remember it's at Kurukshetra also that Krishna met with the Braja Gopis after like 100 years of separation, because there's this tradition, right, in the Vedic culture, when there's an eclipse, then persons will gather at a holy place and they're, invoking holy protection because there's some fear that there will be some disaster at that time. And so they gather at some holy place, holy rivers, um, and asking for divine protection. And so this was part of the Leela that Krishna then this is when Krishna had already left Vrindavan. He's been living in uh, Dwarka for so many years. And then this meeting happens after so long. The Brajabasis, they come to Kurukshetra. Krishna also comes. So it is a holy place. It's known as a holy place. And so this one commentary was mentioning that Dhritarashtra actually had some fear in the back of his mind that by the influence of this holy place, the cousins may have decided to reconcile and to leave the battle, and that the Kauravas would just hand everything back to the Pandavas, right? Because this was the background, that the Pandavas were due to become the rulers. Their father was King Pandu, who had been the king. But then he had passed away, of course. But they were minors at that time. And so the rulership went to the other brother, Dhritarashtra, who's actually older and would normally be the ruler, but because he was blind, then it went to his younger brother, Pandu, right? But I think everyone here knows the backstory. So Dhritarashtra had this concern in the back of his mind that by the influence of this holy place, then his sons, the Kauravas, may have decided to reconcile and to give the rulership, the kingdom back to the Pandavas. So that's like what's secretly in the back of his mind here. So Dhritarashtra said, "O Sanjaya, what happened when my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled for battle at the holy place of Kurukshetra?" Sanjaya said, "Seeing the Pandavas' soldiers and armies arrayed for battle, King Duryodhana," so he's the eldest son, right, of Dhritarashtra, "approached Dronacharya and said, 'O my teacher, please observe the great armies of the Pandavas, arranged in military formation by your brilliant disciple, Drishtadyumna.'" So, this is quite a moment, right, in this complex situation, because Dronacharya, he is like an Astra guru, right? He is someone, he's expert in warfare, and he had trained both the Kauravas as well as the Pandavas. So, it's and he's the general here, actually. And so this is, a very sensitive, difficult moment, because Dronacharya, and naturally Dronacharya, his heart is more with the Pandavas. The Pandavas are very righteous persons, and Dronacharya taught them from their childhood. So naturally, Dronacharya, he's in heart, he's more with them. But because of this sense of duty, right, that we were discussing, the sense of duty that he has with the Kauravas, and they're also, supporting him in his, daily needs and so on. So he feels this sense of obligation. So Dronacharya is fighting on behalf of Duryodhana, but actually his heart is with the Pandavas. So it's quite a complex situation. And now Duryodhana, he's come and commented to Dronacharya, and he's actually speaking sarcastically here, because Drishtadyumna, he was also trained by Dronacharya, but he's with the Pandavas, right? And this Drishtadyumna, he's actually the brother of Draupadi, right, who is the wife of the Pandavas. So yeah, so Duryodhana's kind of speaking sarcastically here, like, oh, look how brilliantly, our enemy has arranged their warriors, because of Drishtadyumna, who you trained, like, oh, thank you very much. And now Duryodhana surveying the soldiers on the other side, and also giving us some context of what's going on and who's who. And among these soldiers are the expert archers Bhima, Arjuna, and others equally skilled in battle, like Satyaki, King Virata, the great fighter Drupada, Drishtaketu, Chekitan, the mighty hero Kashiraj, Purujit, Kunti Bhoja, the noble king Shaibya, the valiant Yudamanyu, the heroic Uttamoja, Abhimanyu, and the sons of Draupadi. They are all great warriors indeed. Okay, we'll go back to hearing Gurudev.
अस्माकं तु विशिष्टाजे तान् निबोध द्विजोत्तम नायका मम सैन्यस्य संगार्थं तान् ब्रवीमि ते भवान् भीष्मश्च कर्णश्च कृपश्च समितिञ्जय अश्वत्थामा विकर्णश्च सौमदत्तिर्जयद्रथः अन्ये च बहवः शूरा मदर्थे तक्तजीविता नानाशस्त्रप्रहरणः सर्वे युद्धविशारदाः अपर्याप्तं तदस्माकं बलं भीष्माभिरक्षितं पर्याप्तं तिदमेतेषां बलं भीमाभिरक्षितम् अयनेषु च सर्वेषु यथा भागमवस्थिताः भीष्ममेवाभिरक्षन्तु भवन्तः सर्व एव हि.
Okay, let's read the translations here. O best of the twice-born, please consider too the foremost amongst us, the commanders of my armies. I submit their names before you. Firstly, there is your respected self, then Bhishma, Karna. So Bhishma and Dronacharya, they're like the venerable elders, revered elders, and also great generals. Then there's Karna, who's actually the brother of the Pandavas, unknownst to them at the time. The ever-victorious Kripacharya, Ashwatthama. Ashwatthama is the brother, right, of Dronacharya, the son of Dronacharya, if I'm not mistaken, very great warrior. Vikarna, Bodhisattva, Jayadratha, and many other heroes skilled in the art of warfare, all armed with various weapons and prepared to lay down their very lives for me. The strength of our army, headed by Bhishma, seems inestimable, yet the strength of the Pandavas' army, protected by Bhima, is estimable. Ayaneshu cha sarveshu yata bhagam avashtitaha Bhishmam evabhirakshantu bhavanta sarva evahi. Now take up your posts at the strategic points of the formation in support of Bhishma. Now, this is a really interesting line. It's not something that, we might really pay much attention to. It just sounds like a minor detail. But our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, he once gave a talk that was inspired by this line. And I thought it was such a wonderful insight into like seeing how, the great souls, they're reading so much meaning into, they have such evolved consciousness, even in, these small things they're reading so much meaning into. And so our Gurudev, he made this really interesting point here, right? So as we've been saying, right, there's this very complex web of relationships going on here, and there's all kinds of mixed feelings, right, that are in the background of this battle that's about to commence. And as perhaps I didn't say about Bhishma, but Bhishma, he's in a similar position to Dronacharya in the sense that his heart is actually fully with the Pandavas, and Bhishma is a very righteous person. He's, one of the most highly respected and righteous persons within the context of Mahabharata, highly revered person and respected elder. So, he knows the Pandavas are on the side of good. His heart is with them. However, because of his particular, social position and relationship with the Kauravas, he feels obliged to support them in the battle. And so he's supporting Duryodhana. He's acting as the general, as the leading general, but his heart is with the Pandavas. And so our Gurudev, he made this very interesting point that similarly, and he was speaking about, like the organization of our mission, right? That in terms of like the practical running of our mission, right? And this is, Gurudev speaking as an acharya who is the head of many different temples around the world, right? And so Gurudev saying, at different times there may be a management that, we don't actually like very much, right? There may be a manager who we don't connect with very well, and he was saying, also amongst the congregation, there may be many persons who we let's just say, they're not people we would pick as friends, right? In the outside world, but somehow we're all coming together um in the temple, right? And so Gurudev was making this point, that we may have our differences, but he said, but we will be one in the service of Guru Maharaj, right? That we have this higher cause. And in service to that, we will cooperate. We will try to help one another, cooperate with one another, and leave aside our differences, right? Leave our differences at the door and try to come together in service. And particularly, I remember that phrase, we will be one in the service of Guru Maharaj. This was his like very hearty feeling. So I thought that was such a wonderful point, right? Because that is an issue we will face, right? If we are trying to render some service and in the context of a community, it's natural, that there will be persons there who we don't get along with, right? We have our differences, we have personality differences, we have different ways of seeing things and doing things. But we also have a higher purpose, right? And we're all united by something that is beyond all of these immediate differences. And so we'll try to keep that in mind, right? That we do have this greater purpose and that we will try to be united in that, right? So very, very, very nice point here, very nice reflection in connection with this verse here. Right. So Duryodhana here Duryodhana knows, right? So Duryodhana knows that Bhishma is actually, with the Pandavas at heart, but he also knows that Bhishma is not going to betray him and he will support him in this battle and do his best to succeed, right? So Duryodhana is just trusting that, even though Bhishma and I are, perhaps not, the best of friends, and he would actually rather be on the other side. I know he won't betray me, and we're working together for this cause. And so Duryodhana's instructing all of the warriors, support Bhishma, work with Bhishma. We are together in this, we're all working together here. Okay, let's continue.
तस्य संजानयन हर्षं कुरुविद्ध पितामह सिंहनादं विनादोच्चैर्शंखं दध्नौ प्रतापवान् ततः शंखाश्च भीर्यश्च प्रणवानक गोमुखः सहसैवाभ्यहन्नन्त सशब्दस्तुमुलो भवत् ततः शीतैर्हैर्युक्ते महति सन्दने स्थितौ माधवः पाण्डवाश्चैव दिव्यौ शङ्खौ प्रदध्नतु पाञ्चजन्यं ऋषिकेषु देवदत्तं धनञ्जयः पौण्ड्रं दध्नौ महाशङ्खं भीमकर्मा वृकोदरा अनन्तविजयं राजा कुन्तीपुत्रो युधिष्ठिरः नकुलः सहदेवश्च सुघोष मणिपुष्पको कश्यश्च परमेश्वासः शिखण्डी च महारथः धृष्टद्युम्नो विराटश्च सात्यकीश्चापराजितः द्रुपदो द्रौपदेयाश्च सर्वशः पृथिवीपते सौभद्रश्च महाबाहु शंखान दध्नु पृथक पृथक स्वाघु.
Okay, so we're getting more of a feel for the surroundings here. Maybe you'll just play that last verse.
घूषधातराष्ट्राणां हृदयानि पदारयत् नभश्च पृथिवीं चैव तुमुलभूनुनादयन्.
Okay, let's go back and hear the translations. Then with a war cry like the roar of a lion, the venerable elder Bhishma loudly blew his conch shell to encourage Duryodhana. At once there arose a tumultuous vibration of conch shells, kettle drums, hand drums, bugles, and the resounding of many instruments. Then Lord Sri Krishna and Arjuna in a magnificent chariot drawn by white horses blew their divine conch shells. Rishikesh blew his conch shell, Panchajanya. So that's Krishna's conch shell, Panchajanya. They all have names. Everything's personal, right? This is the Vedic culture. Dhananjaya. So Dhananjaya is a name for Arjuna. And this is something that we'll see throughout Gita, right? That Krishna and Arjuna, they're often referred to by different names, right? And all of those names, of course, have some significance and are expressing some, aspect of their nature. And of course, within the context of each verse, there's also some particular significance. And I believe Vishwanath Chakravarti, he's actually, and I'm trying to find that commentary, actually. I had it before on my iPad, but I can't seem to find it now. But he actually, if I recall correctly, he gives some explanation of, why this name is used here and this name is used there. But Rishikesh, that is a well-known name of Krishna, master of the senses, right? Dhananjaya, conqueror of wealth, Arjuna is referred to in this way, and his conch shell is called Devadatta. And Bhimsen, the performer of mighty tasks, blew the conch shell Pondra. So that's Bhima's conch shell. King Yudhishthir, the son of Kunti, blew the Ananta Vijay, while Nakul and Sahadev blew the conch shells Sugosha and Manipushpaka. O Lord of the earth, the skilled archer Kashiraj, the great warrior Shikandi, Drishtadyumna, King Virata, the unconquerable Satyaki, King Drupada, the sons of Draupadi, and the mighty son of Subhadra, Abhimanyu. So that's Arjuna's son, right? All blew their conch shells. Resounding throughout the land and heavens, the tremendous vibration of those conch shells pierced the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra. And our Gurudev, he made one comment about this verse, how there's like this sense of foreboding here, right? That the Kauravas, Duryodhana and his brothers, and they're coming to fight in this battle, but there's also a part of them that knows that the Pandavas are going to be the victors, right? And and ultimately they are standing on the side of righteousness, and so they must be the victors. And so this verse here, there's like this element of foreboding, and they're hearing all these resounding conch shells, and their hearts are being pierced by that sound, right? That as if almost they know, right, and on some level that what the conclusion of this battle will be. but it's that's another thing to consider, right? How we can be blinded, right, by greed and other material energies. And sometimes even if we know something's not going to be good for us, we when we're overcome by that energy, we can't help it, right? We have to go forward and fulfill that desire. Okay, we can read a few more verses.
अथ व्यवस्थितानि दृष्ट्वा धार्तराष्ट्रान् कपिध्वजः प्रवृत्ते शस्त्र संपाते धनुरुद्यम्य पांडवः ऋषिकेशं तदा वाक्यम् इदमाह महीपते। अर्जुन उवाच सेनयोरुभयोर्मध्ये रथं स्थापयाम्यच्युत यावदेतान्निरीक्षेऽहं जद्धू कामान् अवस्थितान् कैर्मया सह योद्धव्यम् अस्मिन् रणसमुद्यमे यत्समानान् अवेक्षेऽहं जायतेऽत्र समागतः धार्तराष्ट्रस्य दुर्बुद्धेर्युद्धे प्रियचिकित्सवः।
So now we come to this moment, right? Arjuna wants to survey the two opposing armies. So, O king, so Sanjaya is continuing, right, in his description to King Dhritarashtra. O king, as the battle was about to commence, Arjuna, whose chariot was adorned with the flag of Hanuman, seeing Duryodhana and his army poised for battle, took up his bow and said to Shri Krishna, Arjuna Uvacha. Oh, sorry. We already heard the Sanskrit from Gurudev. O Krishna, please place my chariot between the two armies so I may observe the warriors with whom I must contend on this battlefield and who have come to fight for the satisfaction of the wicked Duryodhana. Oh, I can't remember if we already heard. No, I don't think we heard these verses.
संजय उवाच एवमुक्तो ऋषिकेशो गुडाकेशेन भारत सेनयोरुभयोर्मध्ये स्थापयित्वा रथोत्तमम् भीष्मद्रोणः प्रमुखतः सर्वेषां च महीक्षिताम् उवाच पार्थ पश्यैतान् समवेतान् कुरुनिति तत्रापश्यत् स्थितान् पार्थ पितॄन् पितामहान् आचार्यान् मातुलान् भ्रातॄन् पुत्रान् पौत्रान् सखींस्तथा श्वशुरान् सुहृदश्चैव सेनयोरुभयोरपि तान् समीक्ष्य स कौन्तेयः सर्वान् बन्धुरवस्थितान् कृपया परयाविष्टो विषिदन्निदमब्रवीत्।
Okay. Sanjaya said, O descendant of Bharat, so speaking to King Dhritarashtra, after the vigilant Arjuna spoke these words, Gudakesh, right? Gudakesh, which I think actually means, the conqueror of sleep. That's the literal meaning, this Gudakesh. It's translated here as vigilant, but the literal meaning is conqueror of sleep. So this is one of Arjuna's qualities. After the vigilant Arjuna spoke these words, Sri Krishna, who's again referred to here as Hrishikesh, the Lord of the perceptions of all living beings, Sri Krishna, drew the grand chariot between both armies before Bhishma, Drona, and all the chieftains of the earth. The Lord then said, O Partha, behold the Kauravas assembled here for battle. There, within both armies, Arjuna saw paternal and maternal elders, grandfathers, teachers, brothers, sons, grandsons, fathers-in-law, friends, and other well-wishers. So, we can take a pause here and just appreciate, what is this role that Krishna has accepted? It is quite an extraordinary thing and a wonderful thing. And this is, we could also say, the sweetest aspect of Bhagavad-Gītā, and from one perspective, the most significant aspect, most significant point of Gita, that the Lord has so much affection for his devotees, that the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, he's taking this very humble role as a chariot driver for his beloved devotee. And, there's this incident described in Chaitanya Charitamrita when Mahaprabhu's traveling, right, in South India, and he comes across this one poor man, simple, illiterate man, practically illiterate man, who I believe it's in a small temple somewhere. And this man is studying Bhagavad-Gītā, but he can barely read, right? But he's faithfully doing this every day. And so Mahaprabhu observes this and then asks him, one day, why is it? And the man's also showing all these symptoms of intense emotion and ecstasy, reading as he's reading Bhagavad Gita, even though he cannot read properly, but he's, sometimes showing these tears of ecstasy. And so Mahaprabhu asks him, what's going on? I can see that you're struggling to read these verses, and yet you're doing so every day, and you're also getting some deep satisfaction from that. Please tell me, what's this about? And so that man, he explained, he said, yes, you are correct. I cannot read very well. I can barely read. But my guru requested me to read Bhagavad Gita every day. And so I'm reading. And then he said, and why am I, feeling this emotion? He said, because I'm just thinking about how merciful and how loving is our Lord, that he's taken this very humble position as a chariot driver. Who could expect such a thing? What a wonderful thing is this? How loving, how merciful is our Lord. So just that point, and Mahaprabhu was so pleased and told him, you have understood the real essence of Bhagavad Gita. He said something like that. So what a wonderful point, right? What a wonderful meditation. And like that Vaishnava, we could also say, what more do we need to know about Bhagavad Gita, without even understanding very much. It gives us enough inspiration to surrender, right? Oh, where will we find Kamva Dayalam Sharanam Rajema, right? That beautiful line of Uddhava in Śrīmad Bhagavatam. Kamva Dayalam Sharanam Rajema. Where will we find a more merciful, a more loving Lord? How kind is he, So this is such a wonderful thing, And there's also the backstory, right? That I don't think we discussed it last week. We had a meeting here in Japan where I was telling this, so I'm mixing things up a little bit, and I don't remember if we discussed it here. But I don't think we did. The backstory, which I think most of you know, but we can remember it. The backstory to this is that Krishna had said from the beginning, right, that I won't personally, fight in this battle, right? And remember, Balaram just left, right? Balaram went on pilgrimage. It was also very difficult for him. And for him in particular, he was very close with Duryodhana, Balaram, funnily enough. And and he's very close with both sides, and he just didn't want to be involved. And Krishna also didn't want to directly fight. Wouldn't be fair also, right? He's the Supreme Lord. It wouldn't really be fair for him to fight. How much power he has, it is inconceivable. So Krishna kind of made this offer that he said, I'll offer myself to one side, but I won't directly fight, but I can give some advice, I can give some support indirectly in some way. And then to the other side, I'll give my army. Krishna had his own personal army, which was very powerful. And there's that story, right, where Krishna and sorry, Arjuna and Duryodhana, they came at more or less the same time to see Krishna, to ask his help, to enlist his support for the battle. And at that time, Krishna was resting, right? And then what was it that happened? I think Duryodhana might have arrived first, but then he stood at Krishna's head. And then Arjuna arrived after, but he stood at Krishna's feet. And so when Krishna awoke from his rest, he saw Arjuna first. I may have got that a little wrong, so please correct me if someone remembers the details better, or forgive me if I have got it wrong. But I believe it happened like that. And in any case, Arjuna chose to have Krishna, right? Krishna is his beloved friend, and that's all he wants. He just wants to have Krishna's support and friendship in this battle. And then Duryodhana chooses to have the Krishna's army, and he's very happy with that. He doesn't really care about Krishna or his friendship, but he just wants the might of his army. And so both sides are very happy. And so then Krishna plays out his support in the role of a chariot driver, right? And then in that position, he's giving some, guidance to Arjuna. And so he has a passive role, right? Except, right, and then there's one occasion when Krishna breaks his promise not to fight. But that's another story, right? So, what a wonderful contemplation. The Supreme Lord accepting the humble role of a chariot driver for his beloved friend. And meanwhile, here we are in the battlefield, and Arjuna, he's a warrior. Oh, sorry, someone's in the waiting room. I hope they weren't waiting too long. Oh dear. So, Arjuna is a warrior, but he's also a loving person, and a sensitive person. And it pains him, and he's to have to face this difficult situation. And he really wants to think about what he's doing, right? So, Lita, I'm so sorry. I hope you weren't waiting that long. I only just noticed you were in the waiting room. Please forgive me for that. Um, so Arjuna's he's thoughtful, he's a thoughtful warrior, and he really wants to think about what he's doing, and so he's asked Krishna to bring him to the middle of the battlefield, and he's observing all these warriors he's supposed to fight with, and he's really feeling the sadness of that on a very human level, right? All of these various relatives he has to fight against them. What a terrible thing. And so this feeling of grief is welling up within Arjuna's heart. And we've just come to the end of our time. And so I think we can stop there. And so, then as we'll hear in our next meeting, he's expressing his doubts, and then Bhagavad-Gītā begins, right? No, but Sulalita's only just joined us now. So maybe and I know it's like 3 a.m. for her, something like that. So
Yes, sorry for that.
maybe we'll read a few more verses then. We did start a little late, so can go a little late. I think, did we end on verse 27? Let's see.
अर्जुन उवाच दृष्टिमान् सजनान् कृष्ण जुजुत्सुन् समवस्थितान् सीदन्ति मम गात्राणि मुखं च परिशुष्यति बेपथुश्च शरीरे मे रोमहर्षश्च जायते गाण्डिवं संसते हस्ता तच्चैव परिगच्छति न च शक्नोम्यवस्थातुं भ्रमतीव च मे मनः निमित्तानि च पश्यामि विपरीतानि केशव न च श्रेयोनुपश्यामि हत्वा स्वजनमाहवे न काङ्क्षे विजयं कृष्ण न च राज्यं सुखानि च किं नो राज्येन गोविन्द किं भोगैर्जीवितेन वा येषामर्थे काङ्क्षितं नो राज्यं भोगा सुखानि च त इमेव स्थिता युद्धे प्राणां त्यक्त्वा धनानि च आचार्याः पितरः पुत्रास्तथैव च पितामहः मातुलः श्वशुरः पौत्रः शल्याः सम्बन्धिनस्तथा एतान् न हन्तुमिच्छामि घ्नतोऽपि मधुसूदनः.
Okay, let's go through. Oh, so now Arjuna is expressing his mind, feeling all this grief and pity within his heart. Oh Krishna, seeing all these relatives and friends assembled and eager for battle, the strength is draining from my limbs and my mouth feels parched. I am trembling and the hairs on my body are standing on end. My skin is burning and I'm losing grip of my Gandiva bow. O Keshava, I cannot maintain my composure any longer. My mind is disturbed and I see bad omens. I do not see any good in killing my kinsman in this battle. O Krishna, I have no wish for victory or to enjoy a kingdom. So, it's all very understandable, right? How Arjuna is feeling in this moment. O Govinda, if those for whom we desire all of this, teachers, paternal and maternal elders, sons, grandfathers, fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and other relatives are about to risk their wealth and lives in battle, of what value is our kingdom and its royal pleasures, or even life itself? O Madhusudan, I do not wish to kill them, even though I myself may be killed. So this is, we would think of this as a very noble statement, right? He's saying, even if they kill me, how can I kill them, right? Let them do wrong, but I cannot do wrong. Even if they want to kill me, I do not want to kill them. So we can appreciate this sentiment, there is nobility in this expression, and it is something to, we can take something from that. But of course, as Krishna points out, that although Arjuna is expressing these noble sentiments and words of wisdom, the foundation of it all is wrong. It is his feelings of righteousness and nobility are misdirected, because the fundamental issue here is that we are Atma, we are soul, and there's no question, right? These are all ultimately temporary things. wealth, these family relationships, and so on. And the overriding point here is that Arjuna has this dharma, this duty of protecting righteousness in the world, right? But aside from that, we can take something from Arjuna's expressions here. We can appreciate something of what he's saying here. So I think we can just finish the chapter.
Opi Trailakya Rajyasya Hetuh King Namahi Kriti Nihatta Dhatarashtanna Ka Priti Sajjanardana Papameva Sraida Saman Hattaita Natotaina Tasman Naraha Bayang Hantum Dhatarashtan Sabandhava Sajanang Hi Katang Hatva Sukhina Syama Madhav Jadda Pete na Pashyanti Lobhopahat Chetasah Kulakhaya Kritang Doshang Mitra Drohi Chapatakam Katang na Geyam Asmabhi Papadasman Nivartitum Kulakhaya Kritang Doshang Prapasya Divir Chanardana Kulakhaya Pranasyanti Kuladharma Sanatana Dharme Nasti Kulang Krishnam Adharmo Vibhavattuta Adharma Vibhavat Krishna Pradushanti Kulastriya Trishu Dustashu Varsneya Jayate Varna Shankara Shankaro Narakaiva Kulagrana Kulashacha Patanti Pitaru Chesang Lupta Pindu Dakakriya Dosoi Retahi Kulagnana Varna Shankara Karakai Utsadante Jati Dharma Kuladharmascha Sasatah Utsanna Kuladharmanang Manusyanang Janardana Narake Niyatang Basu Bhavati Tanu Susrama Aho Vata Mahat Papam Kartum Babashita Bayam Jadrajya Sukhalobhena Hantung Sajana Muddata Jadi Mam Apratikara Vasastang Shastrapanaya Dhatrashta Rane Hantu Stanme Khema Tarang Bhavi Sanjaya Vacha Eva Mukta Arjuna Sankhe Rathupasta Upavisat Visrijya Sasarang Chapam Shokosanga Bigna Mahanasa Iti Sri Mahabharati Satasahasrang Sanghitayang Vayasikang Bhishma Parmani Śrīmad Bhagavad-Gītā Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayang Yoga Shastri Sri Krishna Arjuna Sangvadi Sanya Darshanang Nama Prathamodhyaya.
Jai Shri Gurudev, Shri Bhakti Sundar Govindadev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. It's such a blessing to have that recording. Okay, we can read these translations. O Janardan, so this is another name of Krishna. Even if we gain sovereignty over the three worlds, not to speak of ruling the earth, how can we be happy if we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra? Only sin will befall us if we slay our teachers and guardians, though they be our adversaries. We cannot take the lives of our own relatives, the sons of Dhritarashtra. O Madhava, how can we be happy by killing our kinsmen? Although they, overwhelmed with greed, cannot see the sin of betraying one's friends and destroying the dynasty, O Janardan, how can we not refrain from this heinous act, being in full knowledge of the consequences? With the decline of the dynasty, its religious traditions are lost. When religious practices are lost, irreligion overcomes the entire dynasty. O Krishna, descendant of the Vrishni dynasty, when the dynasty is thus overcome By irreligion, the women of the family become corrupt, and adulterated progeny is the result. Adulterated progeny forces both the family and its aggressors into a hellish existence. The same fate befalls their ancestors because regular offerings of food and water to them cease. Such heinous acts by the destroyers of the dynasty are the cause of adulterated progeny, ruining the culture of a civilized society and noble lineage. O Janardhan, we have heard that persons whose familial, social, and religious traditions are disrupted dwell always in hell. Alas, what a grave sin we have resolved to commit. Driven by greed for trifling royal happiness, we are about to slay our own kinsmen. If unarmed and unresisting, I am killed on this battlefield by the armed sons of Dhritarashtra, that will be more auspicious for me. So a lot of Arjuna's point, oh, sorry, not quite at the end here. Sanjaya said, there on the battlefield speaking these words, Arjuna cast aside his bow and arrows and sat down on the chariot, his heart filled with sadness. And that's the end of chapter 1, observing the armies from the conversation of Sri Krishna and Arjuna in Śrīmad Bhagavad-Gītā Upanishad, the yoga scripture of transcendental knowledge, and Bhishma Parva of Sri Mahabharata, the holy scripture revealed by Srila Vyasadeva in 100,000 verses. So, we can appreciate a lot of Arjuna's points, and some of his points are very beautiful, very touching, very noble, right, as we said. And the main issue, as Krishna will bring up in his response, is that some of these sentiments are just misdirected. The sentiments themselves are very noble, but they're not being applied to the appropriate circumstance. And another interesting point in Bhagavad-Gītā is that, and that's something that, is an important theme in Gita, is that it's not the action itself that is to be considered so much as the intention, right? So like this point here, right, Arjuna is saying, driven by greed for trifling royal happiness, we are about to slay our own kinsmen. Of course, if that was the reason for engaging in the battle, then one should not engage in the battle, right? If that was the intention, then obviously that's not desirable. But as Krishna is going to point out, the real intention is something higher than that, right? It is for the sake of good and for actually protecting others and for the sake of the nation at large that this battle must be fought, right? And another interesting point, if we're discussing that, right, about intention, also, if the intention was to not fight, right, that could be accepted depending on the intention, right? Because, Arjuna's reason for not fighting is because he's feeling this, sorrow and family attachment and so on. And he's considering this point about greed and so on. And so for these reasons, Arjuna doesn't want to fight. But that's not a good reason not to fight. If he had a better reason not to fight, Krishna would accept it. So the proof of that is Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and I believe he's referencing a comment of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He makes this very interesting point that he said, at the conclusion of Gita, right, what is Krishna's final message? Sarva dharmam parijyaja mam ekam sharanam raja. Give up all conceptions of duty and just surrender to me, right? And so Srila Sridhar Maharaj made this comment that if Uddhava, right, in Uddhava, he's generally considered to be a devotee of a higher level, If Uddhava had been on the battlefield and heard that instruction, then he would have simply left the battlefield at that point, right? Because, Krishna has given all these reasons why Arjuna should fight, and he's given all these different layers of instruction. But then finally he says, but you know what? Actually, in the final consideration, the only thing that matters is your loving connection with me. So, in fact, you can leave all your duty behind if that is the reason for leaving it behind. If you're coming to this higher duty, your higher duty is to serve me, to love me, right? That is another dharma, right? We have two dharmas. We have our dharma within this world, and we have our higher eternal dharma as, Krishna or Nitya Das, right? So if our intention in leaving the battle is to exclusively devote ourselves to the service of Krishna, that would be acceptable. And so Srila Sridhar Maharaj makes this interesting point. If Uddhava, he heard the message of Gita, then his conclusion would be to leave the battlefield, right? It's a very, very interesting point. Fine point, fine point. Okay, well, maybe we'll stop there for today, and we'll continue with hearing Krishna's response in our next meeting. Does anyone want to bring up any points or comments, questions, or doubts, or anything at all before we close today? Thank you, Sulalita. I really appreciate your effort coming in the early hours of the morning. Yeah. Sweet Sulalita. All right. Well, wishing you all good day, night, and look forward to meeting you next time. Thank you, Gangalila. Very happy to have you with us. Nantashesh Prabhu, Krishna Lalana Sulalita. Jai Shri Gurudev, Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai, Shri Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. All the assembled Vaishnavas ki Jai. Śrīmad Bhagavad-Gītā ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Jai Gaur Premanande. Hari Bol. Okay, see you all next time.